Welcome to the Security Exchange, where real-world security meets real-world experience. Whether you're a security practitioner, general counsel, risk manager, or somewhere in between, we've got you covered. We feature our team of subject matter experts, past clients, and leading voices across the industry to cut through the noise, share contemporary practices, and deliver insights that matter. No hype, no sales pitch. We're proudly vendor agnostic. While we stay sharp on the latest tech and trends, our guidance is grounded in one thing: what actually works. From cyber to physical security, from policy to preparedness, it's all on the table. Let's go. Welcome everyone to the Security Exchange. Excited to have you here as we launch our new podcast, our series dedicated to the conversation of security and making sure that everyone's voice is heard. I'm going to be your host, Dan Pascale. I'm fortunate to be the CEO here at COSECURE Enterprise Risk Solutions, and we look forward to having you here with us every time. So if you can, go hit that like and subscribe button for me. Not quite sure where they are on the screen. That's not my expertise, but you'll find them and you'll know where to find us. I am super excited today because we have with us our senior security consultant, especially in the physical security area, Michael Cruz with us. And I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about a number of issues today relating across the security spectrum, different industries, different capabilities, and have a lot of fun doing it. I thought for our audience, we'd start off today, Michael, with you and kind of laying out a little bit about your background, just so folks know the perspective that you're bringing to our conversation today.
And thanks for having me on today. I will say that it is a beautiful 70 degrees here in the free state of Florida. So very happy. I know you are 17 degrees where you're at. So I hope you enjoy that.
-7.
Minus 17. That is awful. If I have to say, it's just awful. But just a little bit of my background. As Dan said, I am the physical security SME. I started out as a technician protecting grandmom's jewelry. I started out installing door contacts, motion sensors in people's homes. From there, moved up to system design. From system design, moved into a specialty of getting large systems to talk together. So multi-systems, so your card access and your video all talking together. Through that, I was the physical security systems manager for Yale University. And then after that, I came on to COSECURE.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. That's a great background. I think that's perspective that a lot of people may not understand is we kind of do one or maybe two of those things, but to actually go through your career, to be on the front line, right, to be a technician, to be an installer, to be a project manager, to put that knowledge together and then lead an enterprise and then ultimately be where you are today. Consulting is the background that I think goes full circle for folks. And I think that's the perspective that we're looking for today. And, when we were putting this episode together, thinking about how are we going to keep folks engaged, unfortunately, I came up with about 40 or 50 different topics that I thought we could talk about. And I don't think this podcast would be great if it was 4 hours long. It wouldn't get a lot of attention. So we're going to cut it down a little bit today, Michael. And, the first thing I really wanted to just bring up with you today was one of the things that we hear constantly over and over from the different clients that we service, whether that's in higher ed, K-12 in America, is controlling facility access to places. And it sounds kind of simple in nature, but every organization, every industry is different. How is it when you're going in and doing assessments, you're thinking about how are we going to control access to this space given all of the complexities and differences in these various industries?
First of all, what I look at is I try to look at the picture holistically. Not only are the tools or devices that we have at the doors, but what are the policies that support those widgets? So what is your visitor management policy? How are you welcoming people in? And then once people come in, is there a barrier to keep them going from other sensitive areas? Because one of the things that we always have to focus on is that, yes, we are protecting people as they come in. And we want to make sure that we're protecting the space, but we also want it to be welcoming as well. We don't want people walking into our organizations and feeling like they are now going into corrections and they got to go into a prison. They got to do all that, right? We still want to have that welcoming environment, but we also want to let them know, hey, there are places you can go and there are places you can't go. And some of the ways we do that is strong visitor management and then we signage saying, hey, only authorized people beyond this point, people with a valid badge. And we make sure that we give them those guardrails so they can almost self-select where they're going. So they're kind of doing it subconsciously. So when people walk through a building, they automatically know that, oh, I'm not supposed to go that way because of the sign. And then pass the sign, you have the card reader that then stops them from going further into the facility. But it's all about the experience. We want to make sure that we have that nice experience for people when they come in.
You said two of my favorite words in there. I actually said a lot of my favorite words in there as a longtime security practitioner, but really visitor management. And I think in my 20 plus years, we'll leave it at that experience, there is a lot of confusion over the differences between access control and visitor management, right? Those are often used interchangeably when I speak to facilities, operators, sometimes when I'm speaking to managerial folks within the organization, they sort of interchange them. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between access and then visitor management, especially in these different environments?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really simple. Visitor management are people that are not known to the organization, but need to gain entry to the organization for whatever reason. It could be a meeting, it could be a luncheon, it could be a seminar, but those people are not within the organization's database. So they're not a known individual. Access control, we are really dealing with people that are known to the organization and they're within that HR database, within that access control database. So that's the huge difference between the two. Now, when we talk about how do we move them throughout the building, there's different ways. With visitor management, you can give them a temporary badge. You can give them a QR code, right? You can still move them throughout the building if you want them to. Access control, again, you can move people through the building depending on their access level. So not everybody is granted free roam of the building. Some levels will go a certain place, some levels will go other places. But when they both do the same thing, but they're known versus unknown is the best way to look at it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when you think about the movement through facilities, right? A lot of the folks that we work with stop access control at the front door. But depending on the organization, that's like to me where the visitor management piece is so important, right? Because we start thinking, okay, we know who's coming in and out of a building or a facility. But as we think through industries, when we get to our large manufacturing sites, right, where we are a 1,000,000 foot warehouse that has 18 to 19 outlets at it at one point, we're a healthcare client and we go to a hospital, right, where we've got to allow people into it and we need folks to have some level of movement through that center. But how they do that and how we keep track of them with the back and forth of nursing staff, caretakers, and others is often the challenge. So I'm curious, when you think about controlling access through your space, are there priorities and risks that you're labeling and identifying how you're going to put those control measures up?
Yeah, so it depends on the sensitivity of the area. So I don't want to use I don't want to use buzzwords, right? But like when we think about it, it's really forming those circles of protection, right? So like we have that general out area where visitors are allowed to go, and then as people move into more sensitive areas, levels of protection increase.
Hmm.
So a perfect example is patient records. So you have a waiting area where a person comes in, they wait, nurse's station. They can get past the nurse's station because then they have to go to where their doctor is, their appointment. But along that path, there may be a room with patient records, which then now has access control on it where they can't get to. So what we do is we make sure that we have those layers of you're allowed to go here, but if you try to get to sensitive, we're going to block you along the way. And it's totally seamless. So a person really shouldn't notice the circles because like if we're doing our job right, they are only going to places where they really need to go.
Yeah, that's a great point. One that can be challenging, but you went back earlier on in one of your first responses. You also talked about the value of old school signage, right? And wayfinding signage, directional signage, how that helps with visitor management. Can you talk a little bit more about how that plays into the SEPTED concept of things here and ultimately in various settings, whether it's a school, whether it's going to be a hospital, how that signage can go a long way?
Signage actually plays two parts. So signage is good for the everyday movement. So you walk into a place and it has that marquee and it says, Dr. Smith is down the hall, Dr. Jane is to the left, right? Nurse's station is this way, and it's that marquee sign. And that helps your day-to-day visitors. But what it also does in the event of emergency, it also helps first responders. So when they say there's an issue, they know that there's an issue at Dr. Smith's office. They know they can go to that sign and they see it and they know which way to go. So signage plays two parts. It's that, hey, everything's normal. This is how we're going to make our way through the building. And then it's also going to benefit us in an emergency because what happens is everybody assumes that when an emergency happens, law enforcement, first responders, they automatically know where to go. that's not the case. Unless they do some kind of drills in that building, they may not necessarily know exactly where to go. That's where the signage is also beneficial because it helps them responding.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say, interestingly enough, a lot of times we're talking with folks, we make those recommendations, we may hear something back like, "Well, it really only keeps the honest, right?" Or, "It seems really simple in nature." But I've always found that, keeping the honest and having people follow signs, go where we want them to go. It's a great way for us also to recognize who maybe the honest aren't, because I know for one, when I go into a school, when I go into healthcare, when I go into a library facility, I'm looking for signs to tell me where to go. Where's registration? Where is the lobby? Where is the front desk? Who do I need to see? I would prefer not to have to stop and interact with 5 or 6 people along my way saying, "Can you point me to the sky bridge? Can you point me to the third floor? Can you point me to the elevators?" So the value is often there. Do you receive any pushback with your clients when you're kind of talking to them about this and giving them recommendations? I know aesthetics come into play often. How does that
Yeah.
play into it?
The biggest, and you're gonna love this, but the biggest pushback that I have seen is I know where everything is because that
Right.
person you're speaking to has been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't need signage. I know exactly where to go. I know where this is. I know where this is. And I always try to explain to them and say, think as if we're talking about higher ed, think of as if you're a first year
Hmm.
and you just came in from Iowa and this is your first time in an urban environment and you got to go to a class. How do you get there? Right? So like we have to put our mindset of the person that's never been to the facility. And it's really when we actually try to get our clients to look at it from that angle, they understand. Now,
Yeah.
there are always sign police in any organization. They want to make sure it's the right color, the right font, and everything. Branding is very important. So we just make sure that we say, listen, we need you to have some kind of wayfinding. Let's get a committee together to make sure that the branding and the font and the wording is correct. But let's get that wayfinding up there.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. As I've said, for me, everywhere I go, the first thing I do is look for the sign. Tell me where to go, right? And most of us in the consulting business are very used to being in and out of hotels, and all you really want to do is know where the desk is, where the fitness center is, and where the food is, right?
Yep.
So I need signs to tell me that. Awesome. I want to pivot a little bit in our conversation. As I mentioned, it's such a wide area that we could talk about, and we can't do this for 3 or 4 hours today. But I want to talk about a little bit of the buzzword syndrome, a little bit of the things that we see going around right now on social media and outlets from other consultants, concerns we hear from clients about a few different areas that we're going to travel into real quick here. The first is the words that we've heard for the past 30 years, right? Talking about things like the convergence and integration and unification of systems. And I would love to hear from you, what is the value of that and how much weight when we think about unification and integration should clients and operators should they be putting behind their investment into security systems, particularly those who've had them in place now for 10, 12, 15 years? Obviously, we should be upgrading equipment, but should they be making wholesale changes to grab these additional benefits?
Yeah, I guess, when it comes to, the buzzwords of unification and my favorite, a single pane of glass. You hear that all the time, that single pane of
Yeah.
glass. But when you ask somebody, what does that mean? When you say a single pane of glass, what are you trying to accomplish? And really that is always the question. You want all this data in one place because when we think about physical security, when we think about all this stuff, it's really just data. We're getting card access data. We're getting surveillance data. We're getting alarm data. It's just all data. So now, like, how are we going to ingest it and how are we going to present it? Now, who is going to interpret that data once it's presented in front of them? So now I give you the single pane of glass with all this data. What are you going to do with it? What is actionable? What's not actionable? How many operators do you have? It really comes down to the basics of what do you want to do?
Did I hear begin with the end in mind? It's a little
Yes.
Stephen Covey today.
Yeah, and that is the whole point, right? Like if you look at the end, say this is where I want to get to. Okay, now my first thing always, what's your policies and what's your standard to get us to beginning? Like let us get that foundation because what a lot of people do, eh, I I don't want to get us banned on our first day, but like ISC West, there's a lot of trinkets out there and there's a lot of value out there. But I think a lot of people get distracted by those nice shiny bells and whistles and stuff like that. And they purchase something before they even have any policies or procedures or training ID in place first, and then they get the technology. And it's really backwards. Really, what we should be doing is saying, hey, where do we want to go? What do we currently have? And then move from there before you pick the technology. So I would always say, let's write it out first, figure out what we're going to do with the data, how we're going to interpret it, how we're going to analyze it, figure that out, and then say, do our current systems either support that decision? And if they don't, okay, then let's look for something else. Or your system may currently support it. You just never figured it out because you never wrote it down of what you're actually trying to do.
That's probably a whole nother podcast where we can talk about how folks aren't utilizing the Starship that they've purchased, right? So many folks are buying packages with incredible bells and whistles that are sold to you up front, but you're utilizing those systems to 10, 20% of their capacity. And we see that
Exactly.
all the time where we're looking for alternative solutions. We actually have folks saying, I need to buy another product, I need to layer on another system. However, we're like, wait a second, let's step back and look at what you've already purchased. You have those modules, or those are an extra license. You're not using it yet. So did you know you wanted it when you bought it? Or did you even know what you bought?
Well, and then sometimes what happens is, and this is an unfortunate thing that happens, but there's turnover. So, you have one director that has a vision and buys these widgets, and then that director moves on. Two directors later, everybody forgets that they purchased these widgets, but year after year, they've been paying for the license for those widgets that just
Sure.
sit there. And then you look
True.
at it, it's like, you guys already own it. Like, all you gotta do is turn it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And we
frustrating when
wonder
you
how
see
the
that.
we wonder how the budget became 10x too over that
Well,
last decade.
yeah, and that's the thing where one of the major challenges that we have is proving our ROI when it comes for us to not be seen as a cost center. Because a lot of times I can't tell you how many crimes I prevented by the systems that I put in. So a lot of people see us as a cost center. So we need to be smart with the money we ask for. We shouldn't just be asking for the world. We should actually be smart and implement to a plan and then request the right amount of money.
Yeah, it's just so important to do that. But I really like the idea of beginning with the end in mind. We should all be doing that in all the projects we do, particularly before we make investments or make decisions around our security. We have to know what problem we're trying to solve, what challenge we're trying to mitigate ultimately, and what will the value be in the long term. And I don't know that folks always do that. So that's really one of the pieces I think is so important in the assessments. That the next piece, though, thinking about that, right, is you brought it up a little bit here, and I want to go down this road because I was already going to go there with you, and that is the idea of systems. I think we all embrace technology. We love systems. We are looking for the smaller, faster, cheaper version of what's out there and what's been produced. However, I think there's enough noise. As we say, we like to cut through the noise. And you brought it up. You walk show floors. We each are bombarded with AI sales leads every day to our email. Have you seen our platform? Have you seen this new widget? This is what you need to buy. Here's what it's going to do for you. And I think from both the consultant and particularly the practitioner, our clients, the folks that are out there leading organizations, it is extraordinarily confusing. They just don't know who to believe, particularly with limited resources. How is it, number one, I would say, how is it that the industry continues to grow? And really important for our listeners, particularly those who may be making decisions about making purchases, what's the formula to get in the door, right? So if you're going to make that purchase, because I've seen it on TV, what's the script they should be following before they ever get there?
So, okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm tracking the same way. We're just trying to figure out with all the noise that's out there, how does a client with a limited staff, limited budget actually make that final decision on that product, right? That's what we're tracking with, right?
Yeah, if I'm a listener now who's the director of security at my
Hmm.
school system or in my facility, and I've
Yeah,
gotten 7 people emailing me and telling me they're the greatest AI weapons detection system, why I need it, and what my exposure is if I don't install it. How do I
yeah.
start making that determine, do I need AI weapons detection? And then, oh yeah, who actually is the best for my needs?
Yeah, so there's a few things there. So one, obviously you gotta see, do you actually need the product? Has there been a use case? Has there been a cry from the community? You see it in healthcare with workplace violence. They're very concerned about weapons getting through the door and that kind of stuff. So is there a cry from the community for this type of technology? And then if
Mhm.
there is, okay, we say, you know what, we hear you, we understand, we're going to do our research and we're going to look. Now, how do you look? Very important because you're going to have a bunch of different products that are going to just bombard you. And they're going to say they're the best thing since sliced bread, and we do this, and we have AI this, and we have this, we have this. There's some very basic questions that you want to do. One of them is you just want to ask one, how long have you been in business?
Hmm.
Did you just show up last year or have you been doing it for now? There's nothing wrong with somebody that shows up last year. They may have something good, but you have to ask yourself, do you want to be on the cutting edge? Do you want
Mhm.
to be that beta site? Now, there's benefits to being a beta site. You can negotiate some better costs. There's some certain benefits there, but it's really your stomach on how much you really want to risk. If you have a good budget, you may say, you know what? Yeah, I don't mind being on the cutting edge. But if your budget's a little bit restrained and you're like, well, I don't really have a whole bunch of dollars to spend on this, then maybe being on that cutting edge is not for you right now. Maybe go with that established person. The second part is when you do pick your established person, pick a couple. Ask that person, who is your main competitor? So if you're weapons detection and you've been doing it this so long, who's your main competitor? Because they should have no issue telling you who their main competitor is if they are solid with their product. So
Yeah.
they tell you who your main competitor is, you say that is awesome. And then what I would do is I would have both of them do a nice little dog and pony show, would also do a proof of concept before anything is purchased in your environment with your cameras, with your technology that's currently in place, and actually have that proof of concept. Now, certain organizations, certain companies, they say we have to do a paid proof of concept. I push back on that. If you're willing to come in here and you want to be my partner, we should do an unpaid proof of concept. It could be for 30, 60 days. We come in here and just be honest with them. Say, listen, I have XYZ also doing a proof of concept on these 100 cameras, and I have XYZ doing a proof of concept on these 100 cameras. Let them know there's competition there and actually let it run on your system. See how that stuff comes into your dispatch center, your SOC, and then see how you live with it, and then make your decision after that. Then, once you make your decision, you have to start asking some other questions as well before you sign anything. How's that data being stored? How's that data being utilized? What's the analytics behind it? How does your system understand that it's a weapon? What are your false positives, right? Like you can flesh all that stuff out and just make sure that that is all written down on paper before you actually sign that check.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And I don't want to break down your comments per se so much, but literally as you were talking, I'm always writing things down so I can really think about it and reflect on them. And I really wrote down, so it starts with your risk assessment, right? Understanding what your risk is, why you might even be interested in it, then developing the use case, right? So, okay, if we're going to do this, what do we do with it? Do your research, exercise your due diligence, understand the product, who's selling it, the manufacturer, does it solve the problems that you're trying to solve, and do that with sustainability, test that thing, and then work on an implementation plan. Is that sort of the steps when you start hearing all of these ideas of every new and latest, greatest thing?
It is, make sure you have everything laid out prior to actually turning it on too, so that implementation plan. But don't forget, there's also day two. So now you're living with it.
Right.
Are your people trained on it? And then year one, what does the contract renewal look like? What's the licenses look like? Because a lot of people forget what's your total cost of investment? Year one, year three, year five, what does that look like? What does your recurring training look like? Those are the things that a lot of people forget. And then that's why, give you a perfect example. How many people buy home gyms and then the people put the clothes on it? Because first 3 months they're happy, they're going at it and they're working out hard. 6 months, clothes rack.
It's so true. Or someone might argue that's a multi-purpose purchase, but I would say that was not the intended purpose for it. Let's not use it for that, for those So that's really good understanding. One, how we get there, and there's a lot of noise out there. What should we buying? The process that I think a lot of folks should be following to determine whether or not a product is going to solve their problem. Do they have a need and a risk for it? And then figure out an appropriate implementation. So I want to pivot now again, right? We've talked a little bit about that. We've talked a little about access control, about the things that are out there. I'm also interested in some buzzwords, right? And so
Nice.
at some point in time, I don't know, we might actually have a button that just says this for us, right? But that is the integration, integrated systems, unified systems, and the difference between them. And I'm just curious, when you start thinking about that, what is the actual value to integrated systems? Do we always need to integrate? Do we need to be fearful that we didn't integrate a system in place? And I ask that from the perspective of working with just hundreds of clients over the past 10 years. There's a generalized feeling out there. You be integrated, you want to be unified, you want to manage your platforms efficiently if you can and get the best ROI. But I've also heard a lot of folks push back and say, well, sometimes it's not the best solution for me, or I don't want to convert certain systems. I have challenges, network challenges that I have. Can you talk about the value of system integration, unified platforms, and what to do if you can't, right? Maybe you don't have the budget, but you don't have the opportunity to do it right now. We don't want folks to think that they can't provide reasonable and realistic security solutions.
Yeah, so one of the, a huge benefit of integration, like, when we have these systems talking and living together, a perfect example is access control and video. When you have a door forced open, door forced open, camera pops up, it shows you exactly where that door was forced. So what it does, it actually reduces the time for the investigation for your dispatcher to actually see what happened. The old way of doing it was you would have your access control on one screen and you would have your video on another screen with maybe some set views or something like that is important, right? And then what would happen is they would see the little access control thing that says door forced. And remember, this is just a queue of many other alarms that they're getting. So now they see door force, and yes, it may flash red and it may pop up, but they have to be paying attention to notice that. But let's say they do notice it, right? And they say, okay, that's Smith building rear door. So then now they got to go to, because they just don't want to dispatch on that. They kind of want to verify what happened. So then they got to go to the video management system. They got to go through their device tree and they got to look and they got to see which one's the Smith building and which one is the back door and then find that camera. So what you're talking about integration is that reduction in time to investigating an issue. So what happens is now door gets forced, camera automatically pops up. It takes over the dispatcher screen. Dispatcher can see, oh, that's just the janitor. He used his keys again instead of flashing his badge. It's not really a big deal. Okay, so now I just put that in the comments. So the door force alarm, it was Joe. He used his keys again. Make sure to talk to him about using his keys. So really, that is the huge benefit, is that time that it takes for a dispatcher to actually respond to something. Now, what if you can't do that, right? Because there's a lot of
Yeah,
organizations, and people may find this weird, but there's a lot of organizations that still run analog cameras because they're still running old systems because they don't have the budget to do this. So
sure.
what do? What we do is we set up a system that's easy for the dispatcher to understand. So if we have certain critical doors that we know that we want to watch, that if a forced door happens there, we always want to know. So what we do is we set up a camera view with those doors already set, and we put that on a monitor. So
Mm.
those doors are already up there so that if a door force happens, they can say, that's the Smith building. We know we got to watch that door, force door, and they could just look up and they see what happened right away. So what we do is we replace the unification with just a system in place and have the dispatcher trained to look for those items instead of a system that does the looking for them.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, not only on the efficiencies that are gained, obviously, by time and reduction in time that we spend. Used to spend a lot of human hours, right? Pulling out VCR tapes. We're not in that era anymore, hopefully, right? Looking through, 3 to 4 days an event occurred. I think, to me, one of the other benefits that is in there is also operator error. right? There's operator fatigue, there's multitasking that's occurring, and we have an expectation that operators are staring at a screen. We know the reports and results on how many cameras and how long folks can actually focus their energy. Now you add in secondary systems like electronic access control, fire alarm systems that are going on, BAS alarms that are going on. It would seem to me that it's just overwhelming amounts of technology, even as we've gotten smaller, faster, cheaper. So while it's efficient, it also seems like we would cut down on some of that fatigue and potential misses that our operators might have.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, where alarm fatigue is a real thing. I don't know how many places I've been to where I just sit back and I watch the dispatch people, the SOC operators, right? I sit in the back of the room and I just watch them, and I just see them, and they're just like door help, door force, and they're just that thing is just chiming, and they're just clearing, and they're looking at something else clearing, and I'm like,
That's right.
man, you have no idea what you're actually clearing. You're just because, and it's no fault of their own. It's because we have created that situation by giving them too many alarms that everything is not important anymore.
That's right.
So we have to like make sure that when an alarm comes through, that it's real and it's actionable. We
Yeah.
can't have just these nuisance alarms that go off all day long. And that's where the industry's starting to go with like machine learning and making like the machine is learning your system and saying, hey, we know that every day between 12 and 2, this door's held open because it's lunchtime, you know? But then if that door is held open at 3 a.m., the machine goes, that's an anomaly. Pay attention to this. So we're getting there to help with that alarm fatigue.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, Michael, as we start to kind of wrap up a little bit of this episode today, because we started out so wide today, we wanted to start out today. I want to leave the widest gap possible I can for sort of our ending question today. And you just started to go down that path, so it was perfect timing with me. And that is to give us all a tease, which will be a whole nother episode on where we are today in the industry with AI, how it's likely to shape and change to whatever degree over the next immediate future, 6, 12, 18 months, and then even potentially what folks might be seeing in the longer term than that, if anyone is actually accurate in their guessing of AI, because Lord knows I don't know. Where might folks start thinking now, and particularly if they're looking at systems, if they're not integrating AI into the operations, should folks be holding off? So 2, 3 parts to that question to your response.
So where we're going, well, we all know the security industry doesn't move fast. Like if you look
Yeah.
at, the
Analog
police,
cameras.
exactly, we move very slow, and the rest of the AI world is moving very, very quick. If you look back from when it started and now where now it's AI everything. It's becoming one of those buzzwords where everything is AI. Your fridge has AI, your washing machine has AI, everything has AI. But some of the things that are we're actually seeing is that reduction in alarm fatigue, like I stated earlier. A machine that learns what's normal, what's abnormal behavior. Those are the things that you're really starting to see now. They're getting implemented on smaller scales because in order for a machine to learn your environment, it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of investment. That's where like it's not something that happens overnight because that's a lot of data for it to understand what's abnormal versus normal. So we're slowly moving in that direction. Another way that we're going, especially when it comes to video systems, is a smart search. So way we look at it is you would type into a search field and you would say, "Hey, I am looking for somebody in a red sweatshirt that came in through on Monday between the hours of PM and 6 p.m." And then it'll just through that natural language search, it'll go through and it'll start picking out everybody that has a red sweatshirt for you. That's the kind of stuff that we're moving towards, where it makes the investigative tools a lot easier to use because there's nothing worse than somebody saying, I need you to find somebody that had a red sweatshirt. I don't know what camera he came through or anything like that. This natural language search, it'll search all your cameras and then find those people for you. That's the kind of stuff that we're moving
Yeah.
towards.
Yeah. And so in the short term right now, when you think about folks that are on the edge, they're looking at those very same ads, emails that are coming in, AI powered, shorter, faster, return on investment. How much weight should we be putting into that right now as practitioners? Are we in the get into it right now, or is it really step back to what you talked about earlier with the latest and greatest risk assessment, understanding needs, and then maybe a lot more research before making those purchases?
I would step back and really understand. Let's use investigations for an example. How many investigations are we doing? What are the nature of those investigations? How much time is actually getting put into those investigations? And then what's the dollar amount that I could save by going for that cutting edge native natural language search? And then think about it that way. Don't just go in and jump in and say, oh, I'm going to implement this and then move forward with it, because it may not fit your scenario, because you may not be doing as many investigations as you think you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what happens is people always think like we're doing all these investigations, and you're really not. It's just that maybe you're doing a couple of investigations and your processes may be off, and like how you're searching for video may not be great because the person who's doing it may not be fully trained on how to do it better, faster themselves, instead of depending on a machine. So I would just look at what you have first and then try to see where you can go.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the right strategy to employ. Well, Michael, we've kind of jumped all over today, and we did that by design, right? We're here today making sure that folks understand in the world of security, there is a lot of width and there's maybe not as much depth where you need to find it. And our hope was to give you a sample of things that we're going to talk about, right? We went from access control systems and understanding what facility access looks like to identity management, understanding how we ultimately identify the products and what the process looks like or should look like for identifying the next implementation, and then ultimately deciding how we're going to look at the future, right? The things that are coming on edge. Everyone is aware of AI, but how is that going to affect those decisions? And I greatly appreciate your expertise, particularly knowing how busy you are right now, closing out the year with the number of assignments that we have. And so I look forward to seeing more, to having more of our conversations about this, and really to expanding it. Again, we'll be bringing in different folks here at the Security Exchange, ranging from not only the folks that we work with every day, but clients, other people in the consulting market, other SMEs, to really provide a broad conversation about the state of security in the future. So, Michael, I thank you so much for being here today. Look forward to seeing you again soon. This has been a great first episode, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone on the Security Exchange in the future. Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our sponsors, probably also yelled at. First is CoDiscover, right? CoDiscover delivers tailored e-discovery and information government solutions, all accelerated by design. You really got to check them out if you need those needs. The second is ConnectBridge. They're more than a TPA. These folks are advancing leave management, FMLA, and ADA management. So if you're in the market, if you need somebody, go check out ConnectBridge, check out CoDiscover.